Everybody, welcome to City Hall for this special meeting of the Gainesville City Commission to consider some land use and zoning items here. Madam Clerk. We have a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
No.
Okay, that's 6-1 with Sacco and dissent. Madam Clerk.
First reading of ordinance 2023-167, restoration of exclusionary zoning land use amendment ordinance. An ordinance of the City of Gainesville, Florida, amending the future land use element and map of the comprehensive plan by adding the single-family land use category and amending associated property as more specifically described in this ordinance, providing directions to the city manager, providing a severability clause, a repealing clause, and an effective date.
All right, before we move into this, I want to give everybody some basic how we do things reminders. First of all, please don't applaud. That leads to other things, and we do have division of thought on this, so remember to be extra kind to each other. We're all trying to build a better Gainesville. That's the whole idea, right? And I would ask that when you come up for public comment, first, that you fill out a form and give it to the clerk's office, if you would, just so that we have an orderly process. It's 3 minutes is how long we do, unlike the legislature. And when you come up there and your green light will come on, as long as it's green, you have plenty of time to talk. When it turns yellow, you have 1 minute left. And when we get to red, that means I'm going to ask you to please wrap up. So, that said, Commissioner Chestnut.
Thank you. Thank you. Mayor, I'm just going to move approval of this ordinance.
Do we need any kind of...
Yeah, there is a presentation. Forrest Edelton is here, Mr. Mayor, to make a brief presentation prior to, any motions.
I mean, I'm happy to accept the motion, but for zoning things, we usually do at least on first reading.
As soon as he finishes, I'll provide the paper.
Hit your light again if you would, just so I remember. Okay, thank you. Welcome, Mr. Edelton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Forrest Edelton, Acting Director of the Department of Sustainable Development. And in the interest of time and, for the public and all of you, of course, this has been discussed a lot up to this stage. And so I will run through a presentation, in the interest of the public and public feedback. And then, of course, to present that opportunity for you all as commissioners to discuss this topic for your first vote, and then obviously setting up for the subsequent votes, and if any direction for staff going forward. So just to run through it quickly, and I promise to be brief as I can. So just to give a background, because it has been questioned or asked about at multiple stages here, the steps as to the history and the outreach and public participation and involvement. So in 2021, in February, the City Commission at that time approved hiring a consultant to study housing disparities and inequities in land use. In 2022, HRNA submitted a report, and I'll run through this again quickly, of course, and if there are questions about these specific meetings, then I'm happy to go over those, of course. In June, City Commission votes to hold a special meeting. And then in June, on the 4th, a public workshop on exclusionary zoning was held at Bo Diddley Plaza. Then on the 6th, Plan Board hears and votes on these exclusionary petitions. And those minutes are included in the appendix to the staff report. Later on in June, on the 21st, the City Commission discusses the EZ petitions in a workshop. And then on the 23rd of June in 2022, Plan Board hears and votes on the remaining EZ petitions. And then in August of 2022, Commission holds the first reading of the EZ items, and that is the initial ordinances that we're talking about this evening, which are the first three ordinances, 211357, 211358, and 211359. And those are all included in your appendix, Appendix A, which is the ordinances that the commission has passed to date. And then also in that same appendix are the draft ordinances that don't have an ordinance number yet, but you'll see those in your backup. And then, of course, after that, it was October 17th, 2022, the City Commission held the second reading and voted to approve the ordinances that I just listed off, the exclusionary zoning removal ordinances. And then in January 5th, 2023, the City Commission directed staff to draft ordinances that would rescind the three ordinances that I have listed and numbered here, and restore the single-family land use designation and zoning districts. So you can see by the map here, the residential family land use, the single-family land use, and the city limits outlined on this. And on this slide, of course, the 63% of Gainesville has that single-family land use that is allowable, and single-family allows for that single-family zoning, which allows for the development of one house on one parcel serving one family. So that we've talked about the 61%, 63%, and things along those lines. It may be helpful if I try to put it in a little bit simpler terms. The 61% of the city's land area for housing, for residential housing, is inclusive of residential single family, it's inclusive of residential conservation, it's inclusive of mixed use 1, it's inclusive of mixed use 2, it's inclusive of our residential multifamily 5 through 8, and it is inclusive of the transect zones. All of the areas where people, with the exception of PUD and PD, that are able to have single-family zoning, 61% of those areas are excluded to having only a single-family dwelling unit. Hopefully that makes it a little bit simpler, but of course that's been a number that's been kicked around for quite some time. So the purpose and description of the request. Again, I went over this a little bit, but it may be helpful to just go over a little bit of the kind of structure or timeline, if you will. So these petitions that you are seeing tonight, the ones without the numbers, were initiated by staff at the direction of the City Commission, and that is what we are bringing forward tonight. Staff, at the January 5th, 2023 meeting, the commission directed staff to prepare items and ordinances that would effectively rescind the existing or the previous three ordinances. As a part of that process, staff is required by ordinance to evaluate it and provide their professional opinion from staff's side. So just to recap really for, again, the public, and to hopefully bring it into a easier or more digestible sort of bullet point format for the existing ordinances, because we expect that the individual provisions of each of the ordinances will possibly come up for discussion here. So the first ordinance, 211357, removed the single-family future land use category, and it added the neighborhood residential future land use category. The second ordinance, 211358, and please, Mr. Attorney and Sean from the Attorney's Office, correct me if I'm wrong here. 211358 removes residential single-family RSF 1, 2, 3, and 4 zoning districts. It also creates the neighborhood residential zoning district and establishes specific standards for those districts. And the short summation of those specific standards is that the structures would be designed to bridge that gap between residential single family and the more than one or two with accessory dwelling units, number of people that are living there, or the density, up to a higher standard or a higher density, which would be the 4 units, but still designed in a way that it at least attempted to bridge this gap between a neighborhood residential sort of ethos or mindset and a additional units, if you will, quadruplex being the maximum there. But that quadruplex being limited to a design standard that mimicked the neighborhood around it. The third ordinance is 211359, and that includes changes to lot splits, lot line adjustments, and minor subdivisions, really a lot of the process that adds to some of the costs or some of the extra steps and things like that that cost especially our lower income or our lower volume developers or our lower volume home builders. Really limits their ability to navigate a lot of the process. And that third ordinance really aimed at simplifying that process so that the subdivision of land or the conveyance of property and land was made simpler for people while still allowing the city to retain its ability to direct appropriate development and growth that incorporated things like effects of density, stormwater, parking, etc. It removed some of the development compatibility standards, so those standards being the width that was required from some developments, or if you didn't have the width, a firm or hard structure, which of course adds to those costs to providing housing. It removed the occupancy limits, and that provision is something that we have heard a lot about from the public all throughout this process, but also certainly of late or of this year. It removes the bedroom limits, very similar to a conversation of the occupancy limits. It added density to the U1 transect zoning district, which this really, we don't have U1 to date, but this is largely a planning tool. And it sort of points out that to a large degree, much of the language here, especially in this ordinance, is planning for the future and planning for what our comprehensive plan directs us to look towards as staff. It reduces side setbacks in some of the transect districts, and it includes that neighborhood scale multifamily as a permitted use. And that neighborhood scale multifamily is what I was trying to articulate before. That is the up to 4 dwelling units on the lot, held to a design standard that makes it look like roughly single-family housing, makes it look like some of our more historic districts that we have existing to this day. And in some of those districts also include structures that were originally designed for single-family housing that today have been divided up to support more than 1 dwelling unit. So the timeline here is May 2021, a demographic and socioeconomic analysis, including city commission review and a steering committee meeting happened between that May and August 2021. Between July and October of 2021, there was a land use controls analysis, including 2 of the steering committee meetings. Between August and November 2021, inclusionary zoning feasibility analysis, and that is slightly different from this exclusionary zoning analysis that we're discussing, but also including 2 steering committee meetings and commission review and direction meeting, where both, the housing in general was certainly brought up and discussed. And then between October 2021 and January 2022, recommendations and code amendment proposals were developed and presented to the commission in January of 2022. So between March and June of 2022, the City Plan Board provided guidance to staff on presentation and organization of the exclusionary zoning proposals, and then ultimately provided their advisory recommendation on a portion of the proposals at a meeting on June 6th in 2022. In the meantime, city staff organized public workshops devoted specifically to the discussion of the exclusionary zoning, and on June 4th, 2022, at Bo Diddley Plaza, had those discussions at the community workshop. On June 23rd, 2022, the City Plan Board voted on the remaining items related to exclusionary zoning. And then following that Plan Board vote, the Commission at the time took up the items at their August 4th, 2022 meeting and the October 17th meetings where the Commission voted to approve. And thank you for your patience for going through all of that. That, of course, is really to highlight that there has been an extensive process, obviously, for this discussion, the transparency, the opportunities for citizens to be involved, and of course now multiple commissions and frankly many staff members that now are here and some of them that are no longer with the city. And then on January 5th, the City Commission voted to direct staff to draft these ordinance as like I mentioned before, which we have done, and then also to analyze those ordinances. And the commission also directed staff to move the draft ordinance through the standard procedure. And on February 27th, as a part of that standard procedure, staff presented these draft ordinances to the City Plan Board, where the City Plan Board at the time was unable to come up with a direct vote or a yes or a no, if you normally would imagine it, but recommended to move it 2 months into the future for the City Plan Board schedule, which would have been the April meeting at the time. On March 9th, at the General Policy Committee meeting, the City Commission voted to set April 19th, of course tonight, as the date for a special meeting to hear the draft ordinances. On March 23rd, so that City Plan Board meeting that would have happened in between the two, the City Plan Board held its regular meeting where it voted to recommend denying the 3 proposed ordinances and to uphold or continue to leave in place removing the exclusionary zoning policies and practices. So for the staff analysis and, of course, the HRNA findings, of course, you have these in your backup here, but I do think it's important to go over maybe some of the high-level issues here, and then, of course, I do think it's important to point out the consistency with the comprehensive plan. So, the staff's analysis, as it has been to date, and of course at the direction of the City Commission, has analyzed the professional literature and then of course localized data, coupled that with the consultants' feedback data and information that they compiled into their report, and identified deficiencies and disparities within the housing market. And that really is what prompted staff to look at what can we do to try to directly and most effectively address these disparities. In response to the findings, staff presented several of these proposals. These are really what we've all discussed up to this point. These are the proposals that have been before you. These are some of the proposals that have been voted on to date. The consistency with the comprehensive plan. There are several policies that speak to really the issues at hand. And policy 1.1.3, as you have seen in your backup material here, but it's not on the slide currently, is that neighborhoods should contain a diversity of housing types, is a brief summation of that. Policy 1.5.7, the future land use map should designate appropriate areas for multifamily residential development in close proximity to neighborhood centers and important transit routes, when appropriate and in a way not detrimental to single-family neighborhoods. So there is multiple policies that speak to both the multifamily and the single-family neighborhoods in the city. Policy 2.1.2 is the future land use map should strive to accommodate increases in student enrollment at the University of Florida and the location of students, faculty, and staff in areas designated for multifamily residential development and or appropriate mixed-use development within a half mile of UF. The housing element within the comprehensive plan is that the city shall review and evaluate zoning and other regulations that pertain to housing to ensure that requirements continue to be reasonable and do not unduly limit opportunities for lower income groups to secure housing in desirable locations. Objective 1.2 is provide a variety of housing types and densities for moderate income, low income, and very low income, and extremely low income citizens. The city shall allocate sufficient acreage in appropriate locations to meet housing needs of the city's residents. That's the objective 1.3. And policy 1.5.1, the city shall seek innovative ways to encourage affordable housing, which could include the use of alternative building materials, reduce lot size requirements, design competitions for affordable housing, and design advisory committee to advise housing providers on the development of affordable housing designs. In policy 3.5.1, the city shall develop recommendations on increasing the desirability of owner occupancy in the university context area. So some additional factors. The federal government has made ending exclusionary zoning a top priority and addressing the housing crisis across the country a top priority. And to that effect has provided or allocated funding for programs that are directly associated with ending exclusionary zoning policies and providing policy and proposals for increasing housing opportunities in communities. As it has been listed or detailed here in your staff report, it points out the specific federal administration policies that provide that funding. Something important to point out is that associated with this funding support that really is increasing, the city's Housing and Community Development Department has received a $1.8 million grant to develop and support simplified designs and processes for accessory dwelling units. So really trying to support, provide funding for increasing density and dwelling opportunities in areas where it is not currently an option. In addition, the city's planning staff are guided by the AICP Code of Ethics, and that Code of Ethics really largely has focused recently on planning and planners' responsibility for the existing housing crisis to date. And it focuses on planners as professionals' responsibility for pointing out our own professional role in really creating a lot of these systemic exclusionary policies and segregation practices, and pointing those out, and then also identifying where we can correct those and rectify those situations. It is something that planners right now uncomfortably but rightfully are facing as an entire profession across the entire country, is how do we as planners both own up to our role in what has happened in the past and the ramifications of those, but also what is the role that we play today in righting the wrongs or fixing the disparities or problems that we know that exist in the system today. So with that, it's staff's recommendation that the regulatory reforms included in the previous ordinances, 211357 and 211358 and 211359, that those ordinances would have a beneficial effect on the overall supply and diversity of housing within the city and are consistent with the City Commission's stated goals of addressing the housing crisis using locally available options. Respectfully, should the Commission vote to rescind these ordinances, staff recommends that the Commission provide direction on what regulatory reforms the Commission will support. And of course, always and respectfully, staff will move in that direction for the benefit for the city. Thank you very much, and if there are any questions, I am, of course, happy to answer them. And I'm also happy to tap out and hand it off to Mr. Persons, who is also excels in this.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was speaking with a reporter earlier who had asked to describe this for a brief TV soundbite. And I said, there's a reason that we have lots of people with master's degrees who work on planning. It is not simple. It is complex, as we've just seen. So this is complex, and I hope that everyone soaks it in and is willing to let that complexity be what it is. Yes, sir.
Mayor, Commissioners, good evening. I'm Sean McDermott, an Assistant City Attorney. I just wanted to provide some clarification just very quickly on the second ordinance. In light of the city received an email from Ms. Kim Tanzer a little earlier today, bringing up some issues with the second ordinance, and I just wanted to go ahead and address that, from the get-go, just so everything's abundantly clear. And also just to clarify, I'm not sure if Forrest got the numbers exactly right. I think he might have, but just to be, again, abundantly clear, the new ordinances, there's 3 ordinances before you that are essentially the exact opposite of the 3 ordinances that were passed by the commission, several months ago. And the new ordinance numbers are, the first one's a land use change, the second one's a rezoning, the third one's just characterized as a text change. The 3 ordinances before you now are the new land use change ordinance is number 2023-167. The new zoning ordinance is 2023-168. And then the new text change ordinance is it should be 2023-169. Let me just verify. Yep, that's exactly it. And so what the issue was that Kim Tanzer brought to light is that the first and the third, 2023-167 and 2023-169, they had no issue with. It was, everybody was in agreement that it was an exact undoing of the City Commission's first ordinances. The second one, what they brought to light, and essentially what I'm going to explain is that it's not an issue, to worry about, and I'll explain why and go into as much detail as you want. But what they mentioned, what Ms. Tanzer brought to light, and I'm happy to show an example. If I can get the overhead, just so we're clear here. This what it was ordinance 211358. So it was the zoning ordinance that was adopted several months ago. And if you notice, okay, there's that showing. So right here, there's several sections of these ordinances. If you look at, and I should preface it too, with when you're drafting an ordinance, the way you call out changes to the codifier that then amends Muni Code accordingly is the codifier pays attention to only the things that it has to be words have to be either underlined to add language to a code or with a strike through to delete language from a code. And it's not uncommon for ordinances to have several sections of the ordinance, that is, that amend the same section of city code. I know that sounds confusing, but the reason is there's a doctrine in the law of severability, and if one specific section of an ordinance ever has an issue legally and is stricken, say, by a court, the reason you separate it out is so the other, the sections could be considered individually. And this is just the example. Again, this is the zoning ordinance that was adopted several months ago. And you can see this one section, section 3 here, is amending section 30-4.1 of the city's code. And you can see the first change that's being made with the underlying language there is a neighborhood residential zoning district being added to the code, okay? Now, if you just skip to the very next section, section 4, it amends the exact same section of the city's code, which is 30-4.1, but in this case, it now is striking the single-family zoning district. So that, when a codifier is looking at an ordinance and the changes that were made, what the codifier would do is see, they don't look at any language that doesn't have a strike through or an underline. So they would look at this and say, okay, there's an underline, so we're going to add neighborhood residential to that code, that section of the code. And then, okay, there's a strike through here, we're going to delete single family from that same section of the code. You can see there's two, Now, skipping to the current ordinance before you, that, again, it's a complete undoing of this, the changes that were made there. This is the new ordinance, and you can see there's another section 3 of the ordinance that amends section 30-4.1 of the city's code. And the first change being made here is that neighborhood residential is being stricken. So remember, in the previous ordinance, neighborhood residential had an underline and was added. Here it's being stricken. And if you look at the very next section, you can see there's no strike through or underline except for this very first one where there's an underline of the single family zoning district. So the same section of the code, 30-4.1, and this new ordinance adds back the single family zoning district to that section of the code. So, long story short, is the old ordinance added neighborhood residential, took away single family zoning. This ordinance takes away neighborhood residential and adds single family zoning. And so I say all that to just try to provide an abundance of, clarity and surety that what these 3 ordinances do are an exact, I don't want to say mirror image, but an exact undoing of the 3 ordinances that the City Commission adopted several months ago. So hopefully that clarifies issues and doesn't make it more confusing before discussion is had. And with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions. All right.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott. Okay, so normally what we do is go through questions before we do before we make a motion. Let's go ahead and get the motion on the table, though. Commissioner Chestnut, you had called that, so if you want to do that, then we'll go through the lines.
Okay, thank you. I move staff's recommendation to adopt the proposed ordinance 2023-167.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Okay, all right, so we got a motion and a second. Commissioner Book.
I think, given I was probably simply going to second the motion, I prefer to hear some of the other comments.
Okay, very good.
Also, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Commissioner Sacco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may ask staff a few questions, I don't know if Forrest might be the best person or Mr. Persons. He has a longer history. Hi, Mr. Persons. Quick question. If a private project or development currently goes against the comp plan, do we approve it?
No, it's required for consistency.
So how does that process go about? Do we talk to the applicant? Do we just flat out deny it? What kind of enforcement, what does enforcement look like of the comp plan?
So when we're talking about the relationship of the comprehensive plan to the land development code, when we're talking about like a let's say a site plan, for instance, by and large, that site plan is, as long as it's meeting the parameters of the land development code, the presumption is it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, because at that level, we're not talking about a legislative decision, it's an administrative decision, essentially. Really where issues of comp plan consistency are most salient for the commission are when you have your sort of legislative hat on, like you do tonight, or when you have a land use and zoning amendment in front of you, or when you're considering a text change. But typically, like a comp plan consistency issue related to individual development is very rare, because typically we're dealing with the land development code at that point.
And I was asking more from the administrative point, not really from us, like how
Sure.
does staff handle it?
Right. Yeah, and typically that's, as long as it's consistent with the land development code, the land development code has to be consistent with the comp plan.
Otherwise, we don't allow it.
Correct.
And currently, this proposed change, according to the folks at Sustainable Development who are planners, is inconsistent. Like, the change we are trying to make right now is inconsistent with our comp plan as it stands.
So I would say there are, as Mr. Edelton indicated, we have a lot of policies, both in the housing element and the future land use element, that he cited related to housing diversity and densification. We also do have some policies about protection of single-family neighborhoods as well. So like all things with the comprehensive plan, it is shades of gray, I'd say. By and large, though, the city's existing comprehensive plan promotes infill mixed housing development as a guiding principle.
Thank you, Mr. Persons. If you, to your knowledge, because I'm not 100% sure of this, would Gainesville, should this pass tonight, would Gainesville be the first city to impose or reinstate single-family zoning, exclusive single-family zoning as a municipality?
It's not something that we've sort of done any research into. It's the first that sort of I've heard about it, but it's not something that we've like spent time researching.
I've looked around and I can't see anyone else in the last several decades who has tried to do this. But if you haven't heard about it, closer to the ground, then I'm sure we would have heard about it. How many planners do you have? How many planners do you have in sustainable development at the moment? Ballpark.
9, 10, 7, 6. 6, it looks like 6. Some number.
7.
between-
I have a 7 now.
Okay, seven,
with
there you go.
Forest.
Yeah.
7 with Forest. And 8 if we count you.
Sure.
We always count you.
Thank you.
What experience do they have to have in order to work in that department?
We typically, by both the job descriptions, typically it's a master's degree in urban and regional planning with some experience that comes along with that, depending on what level they're at.
So all, if not most of our folks have that. That is a base requirement.
Yeah, and we also have several of our staff who have additional certification or professional accreditation through the American Planning Institute. That's the AICP Code of Ethics.
So y'all know your stuff.
Yes, we do.
I was trying to lead to
Absolutely.
that
Sure.
you know your stuff.
Yeah.
So when staff makes a recommendation, because you are the subject matter experts, we should very carefully and sincerely consider what you are telling us as experts, as 8 experts with master's degree in the topic.
Of course, I mean, that's the role of your professional staff, not just in sustainable development, but just in general within the city organization. Our role is to provide you recommendations, and as the policymakers decide what you're going to keep, what you're going to change, what you're going to make decisions based on.
Thank you, Mr. Persons. I appreciate it.
Sure.
So I don't have other questions, but I do have several comments. The first of which is an observation that there are no master's degrees in urban planning up here at all. But we have probably close to a century of experience telling us this is a bad idea. We have a federal government telling us this is a bad idea. We have no other municipality doing this. In fact, others are going the opposite way. 63%, 61%, that by far the majority of our residential land will be made wholly inefficient in its use, in its present use, and its future use. The opportunity for home ownership, which I've heard many times on this dais as something that is important, will be made harder because a single-family, standalone, detached home is the most expensive type of home unit to enter. A townhouse is easy to get into, a condo is easier to get into. A standalone, single-family home on however much square feet of land is difficult and expensive to access unless you are incredibly lucky or privileged, one of the two, or both. So we are making it harder for our community, not just to find housing, to own housing, which again, on this dais, I have heard as something that is a priority. More than once I've heard that's enough about rentals, what do we do about home ownership? This is what you do about home ownership. But we don't want to do this. We'd rather make it harder. Another thing that this does, and it was mentioned before, but for some reason it keeps getting buried, what this does is put the majority of land on equal footing. Currently, we have neighborhoods that have zoning similar to this already, where you can put this and much denser, higher development on it. Those neighborhoods are historically African American or minority neighborhoods. So while you protect predominantly white single-family neighborhoods, historically black neighborhoods will be the only ones available for poaching, to put up student apartments that everyone seems to hate, to put up a condo that everybody seems to hate. But that's the only place that's going to be allowed. And so those neighborhoods would be destroyed. Voting for this motion tonight will do that. You will declare open season. We just had to take a huge hit to our budget. We're looking at the possibility of increasing millage. Nobody wants to do that, but you have to get property taxes from somewhere. Diversifying and intensifying however little the use of land already in the city adds to our tax base. It would give us tax dollars without increasing the taxes of those who already have their home. If 5% of homes intensify their use just a little, that property value can offset, I don't know how many layoffs that we're going to have to face. But I guess it doesn't matter if we have to lay off employees because they won't be able to afford to live here and will have to leave anyway. We've heard about how this commission cares about the environment, how we don't want urban sprawl, how we want to have I believe the words earlier this week was a green necklace around the city to protect Gainesville, to have a green center protecting us, and so our children and our grandchildren will have nature and be able to see what the rest of the world is losing. Well, this contributes to sprawl. You're just going to have to build further and further out to have single-family homes with monoculture lawns that are expensive and inefficient to maintain. As opposed to keeping it, which promotes strategic infill. This will not happen on every single lot. It will happen on one, and then maybe down the road on another, and it will be slow, but it is one tool that we have to promote home ownership, affordable, accessible home ownership. And we'd rather take a step back. I know I'm outnumbered, but I wasn't going to go down quietly because those things need to be said. If this commission majority is going to make housing more expensive, more unattainable, less accessible, and more destructive, it has to be on the record that that is what you are all agreeing to do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Sacco. Commissioner Willets.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sean, thank you for describing to us a little bit of how code changes work. That's helpful because I think it's easy to forget. I have a couple questions. I want to start my question first is about the demographic review that occurred kind of like why, what do we mean by that demographic review or research? And then what did that lead staff to understand about what, the previous land use, zoning, comp plan, and then how did that inform some of the recommendations that came forward?
Mr. Mayor, so the demographic and economic research was part of the original HRNA report related to looking at exclusionary land use controls. Part of what the consultant did was analyze the existing housing stock and utilization, both in terms of the type of housing, everything from high-rise multifamily down to single-family and everything in between, and looked at both our economic and racial demographics across the city, and drew, looked at that data, and what that showed was we have a larger portion of our lower income population in the city living in the sort of missing middle, which is a term sort of generic to describe sort of everything between like a duplex and a larger sort of small scale multifamily. That type of housing stock, which tends to be older in the city, is disproportionately provides more housing for lower income folks, and that is partially why what that informed the recommendations from the consultant, and then ultimately what was in the ordinance was to create more opportunities for that type of housing to be built, and that's where you see in the original ordinance there were provisions for other types of housing beyond just detached single family, and so that demographic analysis is in the backup HRNA report. It is similar to some of the demographic research that was that Bieber had looked at with the original disparities report, although this was obviously more housing focused. And it's I think important to note that demographic and housing research, while it was done for Gainesville, it is very, very similar to what nationally we're seeing, both in terms of where housing is built, the type of housing, the barriers to housing, and some of the socioeconomic factors that create disconnect between people who need housing, particularly affordable housing, and the housing supply.
Did that demographic analysis include race?
Yes, absolutely.
And what did we find out about race and missing middle in Gainesville?
Generally speaking, there's a larger portion of the African American neighbors in Gainesville that live in that type of 2 to 4 unit or 2 to 6 unit housing. Single family detached housing in Gainesville tends to be more wealthy, more white. There's obviously most of the multifamily housing that's been built in probably the past decade has largely been built for students, for both in the core area, sort of the core center of the city, as well in the southwest portion. It's a large report, so it's hard to kind of summarize exactly all of it up at the dais, but it is I think it's in the backup, and and it's been, I think, very informative, both in terms of not just this work, but talking about housing, and many of the graphics and data that were produced by HRNA around this issue also were coupled in your housing framework that we presented last year, and I think the main thing I wanted to sort of relay is that so goes Gainesville, so goes the country. Like, we are very similar on housing issues to on a national scale and on the state scale.
Okay. Does our comprehensive plan mandate that my district be almost 90% multifamily? Did
It
something
does not.
like, I mean, is some of that it was developed before it was in the city, it was in the county? Did the county, I mean, I know you're not an expert on the county's plan, but did the county's plan mandate that, apartments be built in Southwest Gainesville?
No, but I think as you heard, Mr. Edelton did reference a comprehensive plan policy that we do have, which is primarily directing the city to create housing opportunities for UF enrollment or student enrollment close to the university. Both for obviously for environmental as well as transportation benefits. Student enrollment is largely remained flat, and so a lot of what we're seeing in terms of new student-oriented development, I'm not spilling any secret, is it's coming closer into the university, and it's being built in areas that have largely had higher density zoning for a very long time, but I think the market is sort of caught up with us in Gainesville with over the last say 5 to 10 years or so.
Okay.
But a lot of that housing you're talking about in your district, a lot of that housing was built at a time when that land was in the county, and there was a fair amount of, I'd say, restriction in terms of available densities closer in. And I'm saying in the past, I'm not saying like 5 years ago. I'm saying like in the 80s and 90s. And so a lot of that multifamily housing was to supply housing for student population in an area where it was just basically allowed.
Okay.
And it's largely older multifamily zoning in terms of like the age of sort of different zoning districts in the city. So a lot of that housing is either PD zoning because for whatever reason the apartment complex wasn't allowed or wasn't permitted, or something like RMF 6, 7, or 8, which is the city's sort of generic lower density multifamily zoning districts.
All right, it makes sense. So it's Southwest Gainesville. We can say that Southwest Gainesville or District 3 is close to campus, but do all 4 districts in Gainesville, don't they all touch campus?
They do, yeah.
Main campus? Okay.
But zoning is obviously different, in different parts of the city.
But when we talk about half mile to campus, that would half mile in all directions, not just in Southwest, right?
Right.
Okay. I had a question about 2, 3, 4. I know this is different for some people. We're not used to it. Not a lot of 2, 3, and 4 units have been built because of zoning that has been in existence for decades. But can people get FHA loans or VA loans to build a 2 or 3 or 4 unit home?
Yes, they can actually. FHA, I think, changed some of their lending requirements several years ago, and now you can get a FHA-backed mortgage for up to 4 units, I believe.
Okay, and I don't want to switch away from you, but this is a question for Director Folkston. Is someone who owns a 2 or 3 or 4 unit residential, are they considered small business under your department?
Sorry, Folsom, Director for the Office of Equity and Inclusion. It would depend on how much the gross revenues were. So it just would depend. But most likely, if they owned only one, not necessarily because we have a threshold, I believe, of $5 million.
Okay, that just helps me understand because to some degree, a landlord of 4 units is a small business of some sort, and so that's what I wanted to ask about. So just to be clear, our plan board is against the proposal. That is the motion.
They did recommend denial of the applications. Yeah.
And our planning staff is opposed to this.
So I would,
You can answer it, but I'm hoping you're going to.
yeah, I would say I think just as we stated in the report, planning staff believes that the ordinance that were passed by the commission prior are
In line with our comprehensive plan.
right, and
I can speak.
right, and but ultimately the commission is the policymaker, so that's in your court.
Madam Manager.
Some perspective. So the strategic plan that the commission approved has housing as a high priority.
Right.
The comprehensive plan clearly has the development, of housing in a variety of ways. If the commission decides that this particular policy is not in the best interest based on whatever the reasoning is of the commission, they can change that.
Yes.
The original ordinances that came forward obviously made the recommendation. The commission decided, and so staff is in the position to follow the commission's directive. That's where we are.
All right, thank you. I have a question about planners. I'm glad that Mr. Edelton told us a little bit about planners' responsibility in addressing systematic barriers to housing affordability, and that to kind of let us know that this is a bit of a changing landscape in a profession that none of us are members of. I really appreciate that. So I want to make sure I understand that is a professional responsibility, no different than our auditor has, accreditation or belongs to organizations, and they have codes of ethics, lawyers. There are probably all kinds of employees that we employ that I can't off the top of my head think of, but they are professionals and they have professional standards.
Yes, absolutely, and that is, as the commissioner indicated, this is obviously this conversation we're having right now is not just going on in Gainesville. It's country, across the country, and our professional organization, the American Planning Association, this is a high priority issue for them. Ultimately, as Mr. Edelton indicated, because planners have a responsibility, and we both have a responsibility in addressing issues of social justice and environmental equity, but we also have had historically a heavy role in establishing many restrictions and around residential segregation. So I think that's partially why this is a hot button issue for our professional organization as well.
And Mr. Mayor, if I might just conclude, this is not quasi-judicial. This is policy, and it is this board's prerogative
Yes.
to make those decisions. I will come before you on many instances, and probably during the budget, advocating based on my best professional judgment, things that I would recommend, but that is clearly up to the discretion of the commission as to whether they want to support my recommendation or not. If we were in a quasi-judicial mode, it would be different. We're not. It's the commission's policy.
Yes, you're wearing your legislative hats right now, so.
Okay. I think I just one last question. Since Florida's Live Local Act allows for some homes to be built in commercial zones, if they reach a 40% affordability, does that change your thinking about what we consider to be where multifamily can be built, since that's kind of a case-by-case, almost builder's remedy solution to building housing?
So I guess as it relates to this, my understanding of the bill is that it does not include residentially designated land as being eligible for that density and height increase, that it primarily directs those preemptions to sort of local zoning to property that's either designated commercial or designated multifamily, but not to residential. So we have some residential districts in the city that don't allow for multifamily, or that allow for, and we have some commercial districts that don't allow residential at all. But those districts, obviously the commercial districts, for instance, this preemption bill will allow for, for an owner to potentially submit a development, provided it meets the statutory,
Right, so but
criteria.
the 2, 3, and 4 would be a little difficult because to build in these areas, a commercial area, let's say, because you can't get to 40% out of a duplex. In a triplex, 2 out of 3 have to be, obviously in a fourplex, you could get there with 50%, but 40 would be impossible in a duplex.
Yeah.
And it would be, it's a very heavy lift in a triplex.
Yes.
But sticking with this, just to be clear that, and I think of Live Local as more like the commercial, where you just cannot build residential, and now you can, potentially, if
Right.
you, but the multifamily, so in our existing multifamily, so my district's 90% multifamily as is. So this Live Local, should it be 40% affordable, they developers are going to be able to get around a lot of what we have, our commission has established in the past.
Yes, in terms of those types of zoning districts, multifamily, mixed use, those are where I think the new law is most applicable to. And those provisions, provided, the statutory criteria are met with the set aside, that would be where essentially the city zoning would be preempted in that instance.
To your knowledge, did this commission choose to voice an opinion to protect my multifamily neighborhood from the Live Local Act when it was proposed?
No, I don't believe there's been any sort of lobbying or discussion at that about that bill. I know there's been a lot of discussion at the state level, and certainly with some of I believe the home builders are supporting it. There's a few groups that are supporting the bill.
Has any of your staff talked with neighbors and citizens and residents about protecting multifamily from this state law?
As far as I know,
Existing
we haven't had
multifamily?
any discussion about it specifically with anybody, really.
It sounds like we care about protecting some neighborhoods, but not all neighborhoods. I'll have more comments later, but thank you, Mr. Mayor. I conclude.
Thank you, Commissioner Willetts. Commissioner Eastman.
Thank you. I had a question really about the process of this from this point. So this first thing we're voting on is the comprehensive plan update, or the land use change, correct? So that would be, so is this, after we approve this first one, this is then going to the state of Florida? Is that
That's correct.
Okay, and so we've gotten a lot of emails about how this is a recension of the last one, but which I guess in some ways it is, because it's a complete reversal. But in a lot of ways, we are submitting this as a new land use change, correct?
Correct, right. It's going through the same process, and so that includes the review by the State Department of Economic Opportunity.
Right. So it's so this would be what we're putting forward to the state. When we do that, we're essentially saying this is what we think matches our comprehensive plan. This is what we think is will fit all of those parameters under our comp plan for the future of Gainesville. And then we have the zoning and everything. So single family zoning, of course, is the kind of the main headliner talking of all of this. I kind of wanted to ask a couple of questions, because this is, as you pointed out here, a lot more than just whether or not you can attach to unit to another unit. I have a lot of great historic neighborhoods in my district, some with a lot smaller lot sizes, like my neighborhood in Oakview, where I have a much smaller lot size. I noticed the minimum lot sizes, or the average lot size in the state of Florida, is about 0.2 acres. So when we pass this in residential single family 1, would you be able to build a home on that average of about 0.2 acres within residential single family 1?
No, I don't believe so. It would probably be it would be over density. As the commission knows, part of the determination when a lot is being built on is it has to meet all the lot dimension standards. It has to meet density. Those are those regulations. There's sort of a combination of regulations that go into determining whether a lot can be built on, and there's some additional criteria related to different sizes of lots, and it's complex.
All right, so this is putting all of those back onto the table, not just the single family, but
Right,
the inability to build on smaller lots. I think it's an 80-foot frontage for the lot size that's going in there. What if I owned a lot and I wanted to build like one of the beautiful front porch homes that you see throughout Duck Pond, where you have the home right up there and there's the porch? Would that be possible under residential single family? I guess I get 1 through 4.
For residential single family 1, the front setback is 20 feet from the property line.
Right.
We have, a lot of historic neighborhoods, most of which were built prior to, in some cases, prior to even city having zoning, which came in 1932. And we have instances where we have non-conforming structures, meaning that they might be built in the setback, or they may not conform to zoning. We have sections of code that are sort of dedicated to figuring out, giving guidance to staff when, somebody wants to put an addition on their house and they may have a non-conforming structure, and we have to, sort of go through all of that to determine whether or not and what process it goes to for in those instances.
So you're saying that particularly for these older neighborhoods, there's a lot of existing homes there that don't conform to the residential single-family zones
Yeah.
that we're putting into there. And also, I guess I'll also mention so this will also put into place the occupancy limit, correct?
Correct.
So let's say let's say the Golden Girls wanted to move to Gainesville, 4 women in a single-family home. That would be against the rules as soon as we pass this.
Right. The occupancy limits, which are up to 3 unrelated people, would return. So whether a house had 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms, that would be sort of irrespective of that occupancy limit.
All right. That's all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Eastman. Commissioner Chestnut.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, last year, when Gainesville was considering this ordinance for exclusionary zoning, were we the only city in the state of Florida? That's correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, as I recall, Florida Trend wrote an article about Gainesville being the only city in the state of Florida coming forward with eliminating single-family housing.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I wanted that on the record. Now, the second question is this. A comp plan is a living, breathing document of a city commission's policies.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So let's say the city of Ocala could have a comp plan that wholeheartedly endorsed single-family housing, just as the city of Orlando could have a comp plan with their planners that endorsed single-family housing,
Of course.
and just as Tallahassee would be able to do that. Okay, it's been my experience that housing and where you live and where you buy a house depends on economics. Now, for Gainesville, we know that economics has been a problem for as long as I've been here, and that's quite some time. It's very difficult for people to be able to buy a house on a $15 an hour wage. That's very difficult. So that's where you get into legacy. And leaving a house or inheriting a house helps you to begin to accumulate wealth. Now, I don't want anyone to ever believe that people in District 1, and I know Commissioner Duncan Walker is going to speak to this, I don't want anyone to ever believe that black people do not own homes. We own homes. We bought them where we could afford them. And now, Gainesville happens to offer some choices. But we have owned homes since the beginning of time. So don't let anyone tell you that we are only apartment owners, because that is the wrong message to send. The message I want to send here is that the city of Gainesville's comp plan is as we are establishing in this ordinance. And I am just very concerned when staff keeps disagreeing with the policies that the city commission is establishing. Now, the city commission before us established taking away single-family zoning in the comp plan. This commission chose to move differently. That is our policy. That is our policy. You don't need a master's degree. I have a PhD. You don't need a master's degree to determine what the policies are. We listen to the people and we know what they're saying, and that is what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chestnut. Before we go back around, I'm going to make a comment or two.
If there are any questions, I'm happy to sit down.
Go ahead. I don't have any cross-examination for you. Let me apologize to everyone for assuming that that we had all said what we needed to say about this last fall. I was incorrect. I must share with you that I found an interesting article. I didn't find it. It just came across my email about a week and a half ago from Governing Magazine. Now, it is absolutely true that there is a thing called confirmation bias. When we see a headline we like, we stop and we read it because we want we want printed support for that which we already believe. There are articles that support every side of this, but this one from Governing Magazine floated across my email last week. You might recall that for many, many months last year, or you may not recall, I was telling anybody who would listen that I really didn't think that what we were doing was going to move the needle in either direction. And that perhaps what we were doing was not likely to make much change. Well, Governing confirmed my bias. Let me read you just a little bit of this article. Won't take long, I promise. One of the ironies of this debate in general, and they're talking nationally, in the very few cities that have worked on it over the last decade and a half. It's not like there are thousands of cities doing it, but in the ones that have over the last decade and a half, that's what they're referring to. One of the ironies of this debate in general has been that the volume of discourse on this subject is much higher than the actual outcomes in either direction, says Yona Freemark, Research Director of the Land Use Lab at the Urban Institute. So I want us to keep that in mind. I understand that we are at a point where everyone who is paying attention to this feels like the stakes could not be higher. And I understand why people in every direction feel that way. I get it. But it is true that there is at least some substantial research out there that indicates that while this does matter, it's important, it is not driving us drastically toward something good or something bad. It just kind of is. There's not a rush of folks out there looking to build quadruplexes in single-family neighborhoods. That is what most communities are finding. Now, maybe there's certainly a lot I don't know. There absolutely is. But research indicates that there is not a rush leading us off a cliff or building a utopia, no matter what the change is. So let's please keep that in mind as we go through this. And I'm going to ask once again for the favor of let's treat each other well, because I honestly believe, and maybe I'm crazy, but I honestly believe that we all want a better Gainesville. So let's try to keep that in mind as we have this discussion going forward. Commissioner Book.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I kind of deferred before to the motion, and I think since we've spoken for a bit, while I do have some important comments, I'll just hold my comments. I think I'd like to hear from what I'm looking is probably many speakers that you have, Madam Clerk, and I'll just hold and be first up after that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, well, Commissioner Sacco's got a comment, then I will go to the audience, and then we'll hear from everybody before we come back up here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, Mr. Persons, I hate to ask you back up, but while you're walking, since we are mentioning our credentials, I have a JD and still have my bar card. We have all kinds of credentials up here, just none of them are experts on this. Mr. Persons, I think one of my colleagues misspoke earlier. At no point does this outlaw single-family housing, correct?
You mean the use itself?
Yeah.
No.
Single-family homes can still be built.
Right, we're talking about it's not a prohibition, it's an allowance.
Okay, I just wanted that clarified because I think that was missaid in the moment a couple minutes ago, and I want it very clear. At no point will the original version of this ever banned single-family homes. It banned the exclusive use and outlawing of other types of homes in neighborhoods.
Right, it provided allowances for other types of units.
Thank you, Mr. Persons.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Sacco. So we're going to go to public comment, and let me say this. The best advice I ever got in the working world was when I've made the sales, stop selling. So try to keep that in mind as you go forward. Madam Clerk.
Monica Frazier, followed by Jane Berman Holtum.
Welcome, Mr. Bounce.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Robert Mounts, and by unanimous consent from the Board of Directors of the University Park Neighborhood Association, I'm here speaking on their behalf. They can't all be here tonight. Some of them were to meet with you last night, but I understand you had a better engagement. From the beginning, for UPNA, this has been about protecting family-oriented neighborhoods clustered around what is now Parker Elementary School. And the continuous pressure from more and more density of student apartments in College Park and isolated homes throughout the neighborhood. At one point, Peggy Carr and another did a survey, or went through the property appraiser's office and found that more than 40 LLCs, corporations, own properties sprinkled throughout the neighborhood all the way to 16th Avenue. That was a shock because these are absentee landlords and they have property managers and they're renting to students. And to say that, well, single-family zoning is not outlawed if you had gone through with this, the fact is we're talking about a neighborhood with small children, that's trying to preserve the character of their neighborhood. And we found in that fight that it wasn't just us. It was also Porter's Quarters. It was also Fifth Avenue and Pleasant Street, underserved areas of the city that also, and Zaya Hills, that wanted their single-family neighborhood homes too, and wanted to build wealth and wanted to share in the benefits that everybody else is able to do. And there has not been for a long time any financial bar to a family buying into what they used to call a high opportunity neighborhood if they have the means to do it and the desire to do it. But what we found is in many cases they want to preserve their culture and their community centers and their churches and their neighborhood and the character of it the way it is. Now, that's fundamentally our beef all along, and because Gainesville is a small city, 140,000 people roughly, with more than 77,000 students competing for rooms to rent by the room. And, I'm all for starter homes, for young families, if we can find a way to ensure that those go to young families, even as broadly defined in the code, which is important because that was a bulwark against too much pressure from students. Even one Airbnb on your street is a problem. Even one party house full of students is a problem for that whole street. And that's the problem. Never have we taken into account the fact that we are a university community full of students. We love them, but we need to do this right.
Thank you. I would note that as our next speaker comes up, that Airbnbs are not part of the question here. They exist. Welcome.
Good evening. First, I would just like to say 8 people on a planning staff that nobody knows their names and nobody's elected should not have this much power to try to put their will on us when we've elected you to make those decisions for us. I just want to say that. But I do want to just say, going back just a little bit, when this first came around, over 80% of the community that came and spoke, as well as the emails and everything else, they were against it, the change initially. So I just want to remind you of that this was never a change that the citizens wanted. It was the former board, 4 people who wanted this and tried to impose it on us. So I am in favor of putting things back the way they were. And I have said many times, and I've heard other people say, we were never against small changes. We were against one blanket change for the whole city. As our mayor has said earlier tonight, that this is a complex issue. A complex issue cannot be solved with one vote without creating unintended consequences everywhere else. So I just want to remind you of that. And should things go the way that the former commission wanted, there would be adverse impacts on historical neighborhoods, such as Spring Hill, where I reside. And yes, people are still calling us. One of my, on the next street over, the lady who owns the land got a phone call, a developer. He wants to put up apartments. He wants to buy her home, tear it down, because there's an empty lot next door, and put it up. So yes, I get the calls. My mother gets the calls. My neighbors across the street get the calls. So while it may not be all over the city, people are trying to get in Spring Hill. They're trying to take our land and take over the neighborhood so that they can put up these apartments. A reset does not prevent future changes. I just want to remind you of that. We can still have future changes after the reset, but do them methodically, involve the community in small areas to see where it's most feasible. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And that's all we've been saying. That's all I've been saying. I'll say that. It can be done, but it shouldn't be done everywhere all at once. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Jane Berman Holtum, followed by Donald Shepard, followed by Casey Fitzgerald.
Members of the Commission, Jane Berman Holtum. Can I have one of the screens up that had the numbers of units per acre that were allowed? It was back a bit. Do you remember? There, okay. Yes, this is a very hot topic. And I also note it's very generational. There's a split between those who say anything goes, government should not tell me what I can do on my land. And then a lot of people who have land who don't want everyone to do everything on the land next door to their house. So it's kind of an interesting issue. I just checked with Andrew Persons, and someone mentioned that the average lot size in the United States was 0.2 acres. You will see here that we have 3.5 acres allowed on 1 acre in RSF1, and it gets denser and denser. That is 0.25. 0.25 is allowable in Gainesville. You can develop 0.25 acres. So we don't want to be misunderstanding what is factual. So it is allowed. I think what is being forgotten is what is allowed in single-family zoning now. We can, in essence, have ADUs, some of which can be 3 stories, which are 2 stories higher than the house itself that might be there. That one can allow multiple houses per acre instead of 1. And when you talk about 1 house per parcel, one can do a lot split and have a lot of parcels in 1 acre, a lot of small houses. And so when we're talking about single family, we're talking about someone's lifestyle. And the horror of horrors is if you go out into the county and see those 0 lot line, cookie cutter places that are being developed as in the meeting the middle, all the trees are being destroyed, bulldozed, and they're like cookie cutter houses, 0 lot line. So quality does help. So I think what we have is we have a code now that allows it. We have a new commission with a new vision. We have suggestions to the comp plan which have not been discussed with the community, with the citizens, with the residents that are being presented by staff. And I think staff is directed or not directed, that's a big problem, as to what they should or should not do. And if undirected, staff can have all kinds of interesting options and thoughts. So I'd like the City Commission to have a vision, to have true citizen involvement in the comprehensive plan, in this whole process. We have had inadequate inability to discuss anything at any quality. So obviously, I'm running out of time.
You're
But I-
actually out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Donald Shepard, followed by Casey Fitzgerald, followed by Joshua Nay.
Hi there, I'm Donald Shepard, the People's Representative, and I couldn't be a People's Representative if I didn't stand up here in behalf of these people. A lot of things have been said tonight, and I tell you, I can't beat them. They are set of what is going on, and it's in our behalf as people's representatives and commissions to take and listen to this and take and evaluate how we're going to move forward. There's a great need as far as the money that needs to be put back in revenue. And maybe this is why this is being proposed. I don't know what the reasoning they would propose something like this onto the people, elderly people. I spoke to a gentleman earlier today. He only wants the 15-foot allotment that's by his residence to take and give him the ability to purchase that. And I don't know if he was turned down or not, but I think that it need to be looked into, and I think that gentleman should have had the opportunity to come to this meeting tonight. I think he should have been here because he could have spoke of what his needs are and how to address it. But I want to take and state that I'm proud to wear this patch tonight because this patch, it means equality, it means equal rights, it means us people are standing shoulder to shoulder in this fight towards stopping this from ever happening in our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepard. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Good evening, Mayor Ward and Commissioners. I should probably take the mayor's advice and just say I second Monica Frazier's testimony and sit down. But she kind of nailed it very well. However, I do have an obligation as the president of Gainesville Neighborhood Voices to make a few comments. We were formed first and foremost to deal with this highly controversial issue that arose last June, and we have been, doing our best to redirect, and we're happy to have a new commission to help that happen. Equally importantly, however, we are committed to helping the city and Gainesville's neighborhoods to work together for meaningful, strategic, affordable housing. That's what we need to do, and that's where we hope this goes in the future, in the not-too-distant future. So our message tonight is really quite simple. We are very grateful that these three ordinances are on the agenda with a recommendation for approval, and we look forward to your favorable action. And we're also very grateful that the new commissioners, by virtue of your action on January 5th, have helped tone things down dramatically, and we have started the healing process in this community. We also saved the citizens and the city of Gainesville a lot of costs. There was an administrative hearing that would have had to have been pursued, which by virtue of your action on January 5th, that was avoided. I will briefly remind you all that we did have over 150 citizens here for the first reading back in the day, and we also had 4,000 petitions signed. So we didn't call for a major turnout tonight. We think we have, reasonable progress anticipated this evening, so we aren't, going to that avenue. So I guess really all I want to say is the goal of our organization is the same as the majority of this commission, and that is to push the reset button on the comp plan and zoning matters that have been so controversial so we can all work together in a positive, cooperative fashion to develop and implement plans and programs that will actually result in affordable housing in Gainesville. I concur with Governing Magazine's comments that this would not have swept things one way or the other immediately. It hasn't been hyper-productive anywhere that I've read about. So I think going to a more prudent rational approach, relying on tried and true methods and maybe some new ones, but on a smaller scale would be the way to go. So again, just thank you very much for the actions you've taken to date. You have reduced the community dissonance, and we're confident that a similar vote this evening will continue that process and help set the stage for very positive steps in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joshua Nay, followed by Susan Maston, followed by Ari Rabinowitz.
Welcome, Mr. Nay.
Good evening, Mayor. My name is Joshua Nay. I'm a father of three children in public schools and a longtime resident of Gainesville. I'm here to speak against the actions that you're going to take tonight. We can talk about sprawl, of segregation of communities, lack of opportunities for citizens, but we can't solve those problems without getting to the heart of the matter. Housing policy in Gainesville has been broken for the last 60+ years. The changes enacted by the last commission were a good first step to fixing some of these failures. Will it fix all of them? No. Will it fix them tomorrow? No. All of these policies will take time, but all the research coming out now supports what the previous commission did. I know some on this commission feel that they're in a corner and they made a promise, or that the status quo isn't broken. But I can assure you that housing policy is broken because it doesn't work for the majority of our citizens. The majority of our citizens are renters. The median age is 26 years old. And what you're doing tonight is telling those folks that they don't matter. You've read the evidence, listened to the experts on land use, and you continue to deny the facts that these changes are necessary to fulfill the mission in your own adopted comp plan. When over 60% of residential land is zoned for one single type of use, you're not following any of the goals, objectives, and policies listed in your future land use element in your comp plan, as you've heard from your experts tonight. I know the other side is going to cite some number that it's only really 20% of land use in Gainesville, but we're not going to build housing on roads, conservation lands, parks, schools, government offices, etc. We're talking about residential zone land, land where people can actually live. The decision you're making tonight is at its heart a cynical one. We should be fighting to make Gainesville an accepting and a hopeful destination for more people, but instead, you're choosing fear and division. A decision based on the loud, safely housed minority that believe that the solution to the housing crisis is to build a time machine and buy a home 30 years ago. I know that I'm not going to change any of your votes tonight, but I really wish you'd look at the evidence, question your assumptions, and do the right thing and vote these three proposals down, even if it's hard. And I did zoom in because this is what you're voting on. It's a quadplex in a single-family zone neighborhood. If it burned down, you couldn't build it today. 2 stories, because I hear a lot of things about its huge apartment complexes. We're actually fewer stories in all the single-family neighborhoods because there are 3. This is what you're making illegal tonight.
Ari Rabinowitz, followed by Kim Tanzer, followed by Patrick White.
Welcome, Ms. Maston.
Good evening, everybody. I'm really glad to be back with you tonight. I've been thinking about this evening and what good idea I could bring to share with you. So I'm thinking down the road. If we can take steps right away to bring the community together and sit down together to really hear each other, I don't think we truly understand what's behind our points of view. The gentleman who just spoke, I would love to sit down and share ideas with him. The Bo Diddley Plaza community involvement was definitely a step towards informing us, but we did not really sit down and share ideas. There's so much to understand. In the unfolding of the decisions that are made, we could be the community who has worked together to understand each other and come up with solutions that people understand and that are reverent for their quality of life, that are respectful, that are problem solving. We all have those abilities too, we have an amazing community to bring that to bear. And I do hope, I know this could happen. We could sit down and bring those ideas. And so at the end, there isn't one side winning and one side losing. That what we need is that we contribute to the conversation so that the solutions belong to us. And we've been heard, and we've sat down, and we found a way to each other. I really wish there was a way those workshops could happen. So here's some amazing ideas. What if we had builders? What if the Gainesville builders who are part of this change were the people who had, what would it be, like an extra criteria, an extra consideration in the building, so the people in Gainesville didn't have this sensation that we're going to be taken over. If we knew what was coming and we had information with the builders, that would be amazing. Guardrails is the word I hear from people when I share this idea. We need guardrails, communities that feel that they have been lost to gentrification. We see it everywhere in 8th and 6th and University on the east side of town. If we knew we had guardrails to honor neighborhoods and to do it differently and thoughtfully and respectfully, I think we would find our way to each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maston. So I would say as well that there are a lot of community leaders in this room, and you're all in the room, so I suggest you exchange some contact information and have those meetings. What I have learned over the last few years is that people are less likely to people are more likely to do the us and them thing if the city plans the event. Things that people organically come up with are a lot more productive.
And including the commission?
Call me. Sure. I mean, you'll exchange some information. This doesn't have to be commission directed.
Got it.
I mean, I think we get farther that way.
I got
really
it.
do. So,
That's great.
thank you.
Ari Rabinovich, followed by Kim Tanzer.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Ari Rabinovich. I'm a resident of Gainesville, and I'm here to urge the commission to prevent exclusionary single-family zoning from coming back to the city. I'm a renter in a neighborhood with exclusionary single-family zoning. I would love for more people to be able to afford and enjoy that neighborhood, and the only way for that to happen is to build more density through diverse types of housing, which includes missing middle and multifamily housing. No one is forcing anyone to live in an apartment, but to tolerate some changes for the sake of your neighbors who need help. And I say yes in my backyard. We all have neighbors who struggle to make rent or pay their mortgage, and like other communities across the country, many of us are one unexpected bill away from losing our housing. I understand that we love our neighborhoods just how they are, and I appreciate that there are so many beautiful neighborhoods here in Gainesville, but change will come for our city whether we plan for it or fail to plan for it. Our neighbors need our help, and we need to be leaders in change to help them. We can help them by building more and denser housing. Suburban sprawl, climate change, housing costs, and by extension, homelessness are all worsened by single-family zoning. There is a lot of data to support this. Across the country, we're facing a housing crisis, and in my generation, young adults and young professionals are unable to even conceive of purchasing a home someday. I have friends in this city who would love to buy a house, but have only seen prices go up year after year. And this is largely because nationwide, demand for housing significantly outpaces supply, which drives costs higher. Single-family zoning restricts supply and limits our options, and as leaders, we need to commit to bold action to create a sustainable future for all, which includes younger generations whose futures can seem bleak. Exclusionary single-family zoning is rooted in oppression. Many generations of Black, Indigenous, and people of color have been historically excluded and impoverished because of single-family zoning, which was a tool used to perpetuate systemic racism. By getting rid of it, we have the opportunity to make a statement, to lead by example and create a more equitable community. Before I moved here, I read about the decision to get rid of exclusionary single-family zoning in the news, and I was so proud to hear the name of this small Florida community quoted as a national leader setting a bold example for the entire rest of our country. So I ask our commission to be bold, do not reverse this commendable change, and do not bring exclusionary single-family zoning back to the city of Gainesville. Thank you all for your service.
Thank you.
Kim Tanzer, followed by Patrick White, followed by Chuck Ross.
Welcome, Ms. Tanzer.
Thank you. I have prepared remarks, which I may give later, but I felt the need to clarify some of the things that Mr. Edelton said earlier. I also would like to speak specifically to my concerns about 168 when the next motion is made, unless you want me to lump everything together now.
I would love for you to do it now if you don't mind.
Can I have more than 3 minutes? It's complicated.
Come back for the next one then.
Okay.
'Cause, yeah, we give
Fine.
everybody else the opportunity,
Yep.
so.
So, first of all, Mr. Edelton said, as Mr. Ney just pointed out, that 63% of the land is in residential zoning. It's important to realize that that's only 20% of the city's land, not 60% of the city's, 63%. It's 20% of the city's land is in residential single-family zoning. The city does not know how many multifamily units it has in the PD percentage of land use development because it's never mapped those. So Cumberland Circle, Hobbits Glens, Mill Run, et cetera, are all missing middle housing that the city has no sense of at this point. It's not included. I think it's also important to recognize that some of our multifamily housing, like the quadruplex that was just shown, is in multifamily zoned housing that also includes missing middle housing. So the zoning maps are kind of crude instruments to understand what's happening here. Second point, the plan board process. The first plan board was aligned with this current city commission and opposed the prior motions, whereas this plan board voted on an item they did not have on their agenda and they did not have on their approved agenda. It came up during plan board member comment. That's the only way it passed this time. Third point, the things that you're about to reconsider violated many parts of our comprehensive plan, which is why there are 2 legal challenges against it, one by Gainesville Neighborhood United members, Faye Williams and Peggy Carr, and one by the state, and ours, as you know, is supported by the plan, by the county commission as well. So it is what you have done, the comp plan challenge could be argued either way, and our challenge is currently being reconsidered or held in abeyance until this time passes. So we still have 2 active challenges. Fourth point, Mr. Edelton talked about the Code of Ethics. I have read their Code of Ethics. Their Code of Ethics is broad, and I would say that as someone who has tried hard as a white person to understand black perspectives for many, many years, the first thing you do is you ask the black folks what they want, and then you try to endorse what they say. And in this community, I have never heard a person of color say they want exclusionary zoning or single-family zoning eliminated. And finally, I noticed that the 2 commissioners who are opposed to this left when I started speaking, but I would say that they have quite a few misconceptions about what our current zoning is. Far too many to talk to right now, but I hope we'll have a chance to fix that.
Patrick White, followed by Chuck Ross, followed by Carrie Parker Warren.
And I will ask that folks please respect the 3 minutes. It's helpful if we all do that.
Everybody. Ooh, hello. Thank you for listening and thank you for your attention tonight. I appreciate it. My wife and I actually recently just bought a house. Praise God, it was pretty tough. She's a resident physician. I'm a software developer. I'm a Florida resident my whole life, and she is a naturalized citizen and a Alachua County resident since she was 4 years old. It was very difficult to buy around here. We luckily got something that was pretty cheap, but it isn't easy. I would have with the loan to value ratio that with the debt ratio that we had, it was, I keep saying it's difficult because I really want to convey how difficult it is. And I want to convey how tough it is sometimes renting. I presently rent, I'm about to move into my place, but in our lease, there's a provision that states that if we have a child, which we're looking to do soon, that child has to undergo a background check at 6 months. I got to pay $50 for one of the biggest renters in this town to background check an infant child, which is pretty wild. So, it's getting out of the, that's real. That's real. I don't know how many of y'all are renting. I imagine not too many of you, because it's awful. It's throwing money away. So, it would be nice if there was more opportunity for cheaper options out there. It really would. It would really be nice. I'm worried when student loans turn back on. It's going to be a lot of money out the door. Because they've been off for a while, and I hope they continue to stay off, fingers crossed. But, I would ask that you continue to allow people to build the homes and structures that they see that they can, give people the options that are out there. The more structures that are there for people to live in, the more real estate transactions happen. That's going to be good for the title people. It's going to be good for the real estate agents. It's going to be good for everybody. Just let it happen. It's going to be good for y'all. You're going to be able to get higher property taxes too without increasing the millage rate, which I'm going to be showing up to complain about that now that I'm a homeowner too. But anyways, thank you so much for your time. Please do not bring back the exclusionary zoning.
Y'all laugh about the background checks for babies. That means you've forgotten what toddlers are like.
Chuck Ross, followed by Carrie Parker Warren.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Chuck Ross. First, I want to thank the speakers that spoke before me in favor of reversing this. They made excellent points. Reversing the ordinances that were passed by the prior commission. I expect that the commission will follow through on the promises to restore single-family residential zoning as it stood before the law was changed by the prior commission. I would hope that certain commissioners will not continue to filibuster this vote and or to make any amendments to what should be a pure and simple restoration of the law as it stood before the change. Comments were made that this is going to reverse something. It can't reverse something because it was never implemented because the state held it up. And as Kim pointed out, and Casey Fitzgerald as well, there's a state challenge that you're going to have to face. I think you have enough challenges from the state right now not to deal with that. So anyway, so I want to thank the current commission in advance for voting in favor of rescinding the law and moving forward so the commission may go about the business of finding a more practical solution to help people find affordable housing in Gainesville. And I've got a question. Why does this amendment item refer to exclusionary land use? There is no reference to that phrase anywhere in the city's code. The use of that phrase is prejudicial and inflammatory to these proceedings. The mayor, manager, and city attorney should know better than to allow that phraseology to be used in an official document or to reference it to these ordinances. I think the use of these phrases should be called out as wrong and dropped. Thank you.
Thank you. It is a very common phrasing industry and nationally at this point. So.
Carrie Parker Warren, followed by Collie Blount, followed by Andy Coffey.
I'm Carrie, Carrie Parker Warren. Thanks for the opportunity.
Welcome.
My first question is, does the staff work for you or do you work for the staff? I was an administrator too, and if I stood up in front of the faculty and went against my boss, I wouldn't be there very long. Nobody would have my back. Number two, I have a niece in first grade, and she couldn't tell me where to live or what to do when I got there. We do have some first graders. I'm not sure if we have any here tonight, but we do have some people that think like first graders. I want to say thank you so much for the people that understand what we want. We have been told what to do, where to live for many, many years. One student from the University of Florida came up and said that, do not vote for this tonight. Well, on Fifth Avenue, they had single-member homes on Fifth Avenue. Go over there today and look up, and you can barely see the sky because we have lots of tall buildings over there. We don't want that in our neighborhoods. We want homes. We want to live in a home, and we have, as poor people, have always wanted to live in a home. I lived in a home when I grew up. It wasn't the best home. It was a little shack leaning against a tree, but we called it our home. And that's what we want now, single-member homes in our community. There were many things said tonight. One thing I heard was, this is my budget. It's not your budget. It's the people's budget. It's the taxpayers' budget. That's what you're working on, the taxpayers' budget. We have poor people that live all over this county. We don't want it to continue that thousands of people are living in two-story homes, six-story homes, and seven stories all over the county. We don't want that anymore because it's not going to affect the students at the university. It's not going to affect too many people that look like that don't look like me. We want you to understand that the vote tonight, we appreciate what you're doing, and we appreciate the motion that was made. I came tonight thinking that this was going to be a piece of cake, but we do have people that's dragging it out to get what they want.
Colleague Blount, followed by Andy Coffey.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Blount.
It is a piece of cake, but it's a cake of C4, and it's going to blow up everything. The previous commission and the historian mayor correctly analyzed what happened in the past, how we got to this tale of two cities, and our separate and unequal housing situation. And exclusionary zoning and other discriminatory practices were very much part of it. But it happened over 4 generations. You can't just instantly reverse it. They went from a correct historical analysis to magical thinking that they could suddenly just reverse this. If we go ahead with the elimination of the single-family zoning, you won't magically transform the market. You will open up those single-family districts to the market that we have, which is a nation full of developers whose favorite hot button is concierge luxury student housing. You're going to have those single-family neighborhoods, every available space. In fact, they will find available spaces by coming in and offering huge sums of money to owners to assemble lots large enough to put up multi-unit housing with the usual 4-bedroom, 4-bath, top-of-price apartments for students. You will open those neighborhoods to the market that we have, and that's what it's building and will build. The proposal put forward last fall did nothing to address price points or design. Nothing made sure that those units would be affordable or that they would be suitable for families. That's what's missing. So single-family districts should exist, but they should have mixed income housing. Your task is to make sure that the infill in the existing single-family neighborhoods are affordable single-family homes, and to continue that pattern in every new development. And the other day when I criticized the inclusionary zoning proposal you have, I was told, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I don't want the ineffective to be the enemy of the effective. That plan is going to be a superfluous and insignificant change. You need to come back with a strong inclusionary plan instead of trying to eliminate single family in one fell swoop, because it's not going to result in what they magically imagined last fall.
Thank you, Mr. Blount.
Final speaker is Andy Coffey.
Welcome, Mr. Coffey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Andy Coffey. I've been developing single-family infill housing in Gainesville for the last 10 years or so. And I'm surprised by how much of what I've heard I can agree with tonight. What you have before you is a dozen or so measures that are intended to create opportunities for more affordable housing types to be developed. Only one appears to be particularly controversial, and that's the one that would allow multifamily to be developed in single-family neighborhoods. And as a developer, that's the one that is least concerning to me as a business concern, because I don't think it is likely to make sense for multifamily housing to be built in single-family neighborhoods. What I do think creates opportunities for more affordable housing in terms of smaller houses on smaller lots is all the rest of the components of the ordinances that are before you. So I just want to encourage you to not throw the baby out with the bathwater and keep the provisions that would allow smaller houses on smaller lots. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all? Okay. Back to Commissioner Book.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is going to be probably one of the very few times that you're going to see me looking down, because I've made so many notes based on what's been said by some of our community members, as well as things that have been said by my colleagues here. And it seems like we've had a year-plus time frame of tremendous community involvement. This is not an issue that has not been vetted well through our neighbors and our residents in our community. It's been vetted well. And typically, the way that I view some of the issues in my short tenure up here is I look and kind of research and read and hear, what does the community say? I do believe that the community acts as experts in most community matters. And then I determine, is it, and this is going to sound unusual, is it immoral, illegal, or unethical? And if it's not, and in most cases, in probably all cases, it's not, community input is substantial input in the way that we should govern. I believe that what the community tells us is why we're up here. And I think in most cases, it's going to align with just about everything we have in our ordinances and our comprehensive plan and our land use and our zoning, because we're the policymakers. That's what we do. So looking down, we know that we have affordable housing shortages. I would suspect we all agree with that. We know that. We know we have short housing stock, and we do not have enough housing options for those who are impoverished, in poverty, and who are vulnerable. That's a fact. We have statistics and data and demographics in our community that indicate that those are gaps and deficiencies we have in the city of Gainesville. However, this is really important. Those gaps and those deficiencies are not going to be solved by the ordinances that were attempted to be put in place in 2022. They're not. They won't work. They will not solve those problems I just mentioned. If they would solve those problems, I think I would have a very different view of these particular ordinances, but they don't. So these ordinances that I hope are resetting, they're, I think, taking a message from Ms. Frazier, who I felt like she was reading what I had already written as notes based on, I don't know if she had this up on the screen, and Mr. Fitzgerald, the same thing. She said they're basically sweeping, they're overarching, they're too broad. And we can take strategic steps and steps incrementally to address, these are comprehensive solutions, not one solution, to address the gaps and deficiencies I was talking about. This doesn't do it. It does not work. If these type of ordinances would have worked, they would have worked for the last 40 years in College Park and University Park neighborhoods where people have bought single-family residential lots, and they did not provide those for affordable housing uses. They provided those for maximum profit, maximum density, and they cause issues for those neighborhoods. So that's why I'm happy to see that you have someone speaking on behalf of essentially UPNA. Obviously, we have a group called Gainesville Neighborhood Voices, but we have seen examples of why it won't work. We have concrete information that indicates it won't work. Something of interest, we heard about federal guidelines and policies and direction at the federal level, and it is important that we are in tune with federal guidelines and policy, and state for that matter. We've been having a lot of debate about some of the kind of the state legislative actions that are coming our direction. However, I feel that the ordinances that we're talking about here are clearly in compliance and follow federal guidelines and local guidelines for what we do. They're not at odds with those particular guidelines because we can figure out diverse housing stock and not necessarily make a sweeping step that impacts all our neighborhoods and doesn't preserve the integrity of our neighborhoods. It does not. I don't, kind of looking, so the goals of neighborhood integrity are not mutually exclusive with trying to find better housing options for those who need better housing options, because that's a problem that we have. They're not. These work together. These are complementary goals that we have. I would suspect the vast majority of our community supports us attempting to help our most vulnerable, the impoverished, those in poverty, those who need good career and technical education and workforce jobs. And I want them to have the housing and the transit, the transportation, and the options to get those jobs. And move potentially from multifamily housing to single-family housing if they want to. And if they don't want to, or they want to live in, for example, a condominium, a cottage type of neighborhood, which is something that we've already spoken about at this particular dais, and I think maybe something we'll be talking about in the future. That's their choice. But it's also the choice of the people that are living in our single-family neighborhoods. They chose that based on where they wanted to live, based on the conditions they wanted to live, and that's not exclusive to still wanting to help those that need to get to the areas that we want to the levels that we want to. I think probably the best way, this is probably the longest I've spoken in the 4 months, by the way. I'm looking here and I'm going, boy, I've been speaking for beyond the 3 minutes, Mr. Mayor. I look at that. So if I had 3 minutes, I'd be over, and you'd be telling me it's time to sit down. So community input, I kind of started by talking about community input. That is a critical component of the way that we govern. Critical. And community input is also a significant factor in comprehensive plans. You must have comprehensive community input to deal with a comprehensive plan. It's a piece of that. And nothing that we're doing here is at odds in any way, shape, or form with what I think Mr. Edelton said it. There's some, and I think Mr. Person said it. There's some really nuanced actions to talk about goals, and nothing what we do is at odds with those goals in the comprehensive plan. So I guess let me conclude and say, so we can preserve our neighborhoods. We can do that. And we can still strategically plan and make incremental changes and do things that will improve our community as a whole. And I think that's probably everybody's goal up here, even if we may get to it in different ways. Even if we may get to it in different ways. It's clear, why do I support what is going to be all three of these ordinances? Not rescission of the previous ordinance. These ordinances we're putting in place, I support them because I believe that the vast majority of our community supports them, not because it's my hidden agenda or personal agenda. And I think that on balance, it does nothing. The ordinances that were in place before that fortunately were never implemented. I think Mr. Ross, you might have said that. They never got to implementation, would not have solved the problems that we're trying to solve here tonight. So that's my most long-winded speech that I've made this particular year. Mr. Mayor, I do support the three ordinances, and I do hope that we'll get to some finality here within the next few minutes. Thank you, sir. One other thing, I'm sorry. So this is also important. I've said that a few times. We're going to have some disagreement up here by the way that we vote. That's clear. That's okay. I would just ask that for those, whether you're in social media or you're speaking or you're talking, regardless of the way that myself and the colleagues vote, let's be civil to the folks that disagree with the way that we all vote, whether you agree or disagree, because that's really what builds community. That's a critical aspect. We're not, there's going to be no 7-0 for anything tonight. That's not most votes. But we still have to understand that to build community, you have to build consensus. To build consensus, you have to speak to people in ways that respect what they say and respect what they do, even if we disagree. So I just ask, kind of keep that in mind as we probably have some disagreement in our vote. And I think that would be appreciated, probably by all 7 of us. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Book. Commissioner Willetts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was out of respect for the speakers tonight who don't have columns in local newspapers, who haven't been frequent editor or letters to the editor to the Gainesville Sun, who do have their homestead homes in Gainesville, that I absolutely picked Miss Kim Tanzer for when I got up to go use the restroom, because I know a lot about what Miss Kim Tanzer has done in her life and her body of work locally. So out of respect for everyone else, yes, I absolutely did pick Kim Tanzer to go relieve myself. So I want to talk about a few things, and I know this seems like, why is this such a longer meeting, and why did Commissioner Willetts help extend it? But this is the meeting where the ordinance is actually before me for the first time. I was elected in November, and whatever other conversations there have been, it is my duty to talk today about this. And this is, though perhaps not a deliberative, people not think of it as a deliberative body because half of what we do is from out there. It's not us deliberating like it's U.S. Congress. This is a deliberative body, and so I'm going to have those deliberations. This, for me, starts out in my background in urban geography, and when I was getting my undergraduate degree, and then some in grad school. I took a land use law class, and the things I learned years ago, decades ago, come to fruition now. And zoning in and of itself, the reason why we have exclusionary zoning is because in 1917, they banned literal racial zoning. And that was a U.S. Supreme Court case, Buchanan versus Worley. And then after that, cities and communities started to move and see what they could do. And then it was in Euclid versus Ambler where they said, yes, we can have exclusionary zoning. This has got a dark, dark history about how we segregate our communities. And I always like listening to Mr. Blount because he really talks about how, there was a problem in the past and looking about how we're going to get to it in the future. And I appreciate the argument that we have decades of baking in the problem, and then perhaps we cannot fix it immediately. And I agree, we can't fix it immediately. I think this is a step in the direction. I am shocked but not surprised, or maybe I'm surprised but I shouldn't be shocked about some of the language that has been around this issue and that we even hear tonight. And when someone says, even one is a problem, all I think of is even one apartment, even one boarding house, even one gay couple in a neighborhood, even one house full of students who are renting. That even one language stuck out at me because I know where that language comes from. This is just a rhyme in history, going back decades and generations. It's a rhyme. I heard it clearly. I'm not a poet, but I heard it rhyme. The generational split, it's not even, I don't think, a generational split. It's a have and have not. I have recently become a have, finally buying my apartment. But my experience in Gainesville is living in multifamily housing. And if you consider 3 or 4 people who aren't related in a home, that's my multifamily to begin with, and then ADU situation, and then townhouse, and then now apartment. An apartment I plan on living for many, many years because I now have a mortgage on it.
So I think some of the generational divide is really a have and a have not, and when you got your have, if you do have. And the data we know is that this generational divide is not just like, oh, well, those people are just happen to be younger, but all generations go through it. Voting demographics is like that. Generation goes through it. Young people don't vote as often. Later on, they age into it, and we have decades of experiencing this. What is different now is people under 30, under 40, under 45, they literally are not at the same levels of home ownership as the generations that went before, to a significant degree. And so it really is truly different. So when we talk about a generational divide on this issue, some of it is just literally because I'm a lot closer to the housing market because I looked for years to buy. I have been someone who has had to move when rent went up. I only went to go buy because my rent in a townhouse was going to go up significantly, and I couldn't square that. So I'm just a lot closer to it than a lot of people I know. But even closer to this issue are the 90% of people in my district who live in multifamily, and I knocked on their doors, and this was not the issue that was foremost on their mind. And even when I pushed it a little bit, it wasn't the foremost thing on their mind. And when the very few times it did come up, and I could ask someone, I'm walking on a block of 4 townhouses, and I say, should your home be banned in 63, 65%, 61% of the city? And of course they're like, what do you mean? Describe it to them. And almost universally they agreed with me that it shouldn't. And I ran my campaign from the beginning to the end saying we should have different types of housing spread out throughout the city, not just in Southwest or just right around the university. That's great. More students are living within walking distance. But that was the split I saw when I'm out knocking on doors is that, and it's not all students in my district in Southwest. It's not all students that live in rental housing or in multifamily. We have the data. There are a lot of families that live in multifamily. There are young working people. There are students who are 30. They're graduate students. They're law students. They're resident physicians. Who aren't exactly students, but they're here finishing a program. So multifamily, and whether that's big, small, duplex, triplex, quadplex, I think it's something we need across the city. I think there's a reason why our plan board doesn't approve going back. I think there's a reason why planning staff has described why the previous change was in line with our plan board, with our comprehensive plan. And though I know that this isn't going to change everything, I do think that it is a necessary step. It is not, fully adequate, not fully sufficient, but I think it's a necessary step because I think at the core and the root of this is about, at the most small level, is even one going to ruin Gainesville? Is even one duplex on your neighborhood going to ruin it? Is the sky going to fall? Should we protect our women and children? Should we put up a fence around our yard? Should we buy guns? Because even one is a problem. And I think that's what, for me, this really gets to, is it the even one? Is it? I have just been signaled that I should continue this for as long as I care, so I'm gonna relax a little bit. I think that's the thing, is I think we're at a position where this is about who are we going to welcome to our city and our neighborhoods. In all of our neighborhoods, is the even one just too much? Is it too much of a problem to have a duplex, a triplex, a quadplex? Because this isn't a much bigger conversation of should every single part of the city be eligible for as big of, for 12 stories, because it has 40% affordable housing. Because my neighborhood is now eligible for 12 stories, if it's 40%, because I live in multifamily zoning. I don't know if there's a parcel close enough to do it. But actually, no, I do know the Gainesville Sun parcel. So the thing is my neighborhood now has a supposed threat, but no one has rushed to protect my neighborhood. And maybe because it doesn't need protecting. Maybe because my neighborhood is okay. It can have some more neighbors in it. But the homes we build, the homes that are here, I do think this is like a small piece, and of course, it's not going to fix everything, but I think it's necessary. It's not sufficient. It's necessary for the 3 ordinances that were passed, and I think that it does come down to this contentious, because this is actually about new neighbors in all corners. And let's be really strategic, and let's, and then, okay, when I know exactly what that means. It's my neighborhood, it's my Southwest Gainesville, it's my district, it's my voters, it's my residents, it's my neighbors. And so I'm very skeptical of a sort of super nuanced plan. I like the idea, there's people who say, let's do it only on transit corridors and around certain hubs. I like that idea, but then I know that gets narrowed and narrowed and narrowed down, and then it's just, all right, more of it in Southwest Gainesville, or only within, quarter, half mile of the University of Florida, or big job centers, which is, again, Butler Plaza, my district. So I think this comes down to, are people welcome to have homes in all corners of the city, or are they not? And that's at the core. I think that's why it's a hard conversation, because it's the real deep, and every single person has to think about it and answer it. Are these people welcome in my neighborhood? Are their homes welcome close to my homes? I think that's why it's so contentious, because I think it's a real, everyone has a real visceral response to it, because they all live somewhere, they all live in a home. So I think that's why. But I won't be supporting the measures tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Eastman.
Thank you. I just want to thank everyone for coming out and thank staff. I look out in the room and I see people I know that have been working on this issue on both sides for many, many years. I've read Dr. Tanzer's articles over the years. I see a lot of the planning staff who has really put in many hours and years of time into this. And I was really hoping that I'd be able to sit here and do what I heard Susan Maston refer to, which is try to bring the community together without one side winning and one side losing, without feeling like we're going in one intense direction where we're going to allow quadruplexes on every lot, over to the other direction where we're just going to go back to the 1958 zoning code with no changes. I was really hoping that we would find that middle ground. And I won't be supporting this today, partially because I keep hearing this issue referred to as a recension of the overall zoning code. And in some ways it is, but in a lot of ways, this is our zoning code. At the end of the day, Mayor Ward will be signing it at the bottom saying, this is what we believe the future of Gainesville should look like. And it's not a future that I think is working at this moment or will work into the future. I think it's a future of Gainesville where we continue to see the price of homes get higher and higher, where the small single-family homes like the one I live in get torn down and large McMansions go up in their place, where we just continue to see high-rise, expensive development along our main corridors while it gets less and less able for working-class people to live here. I think it's a vision of where suburbs continue to go further outside of our city, it's not something that I could put my name to. I think we can find a way that we could solve problems within this paradigm of all of this, while still protecting neighborhoods, while still preserving the character of the things we love. I appreciated what you said, Commissioner Book. But I want us to know, to really put the weight of all of this on here, because I hear people say that the research is sort of mixed, that we're not sure where this is. And I think at this point, there was a time, I'd say about 10 years ago, we weren't sure how zoning reform really impacted the cost of housing and environmental issues. I think that's pretty much a settled debate now. The research is as clear as it can be. I think you can probably find more climate scientists who believe that climate change is not man-made than you'll find housing researchers who don't think that we need to change aspects of our zoning reform. I was going back through, Mayor, the governing document you had. It's called Land Use Reforms and Housing Costs. Does allowing for increased density lead to greater affordability? And they did find that out from 3 to 9 years that there was an increase in supply, but not necessarily a change in price. But it did say this: reforms that increase land use restrictions in lower allowed densities, like the one we're voting on, are associated with increased median rents and a reduction in units affordable to middle income renters. So I want us to recognize that so much of public policy is about balance, right? It is about making sure that the things that we love about the neighborhoods that we live in continue to exist, while also recognizing when we need to make changes and when we need to work on this. The zoning that we are going to, the one that we will be putting our name to, was originally conceived in 1958. Before that, you could build essentially, I think, quadruplexes across the city. And it feels like a 1958 zoning code. It is, in 1958, the average family had 3.62 kids. It was for the design was for large homes with large lots. It was an economic boom post-World War II we thought was never going to end. Before we had any idea what global warming was, before we had any concept of the impacts of environmental destruction or sprawl, there wasn't really an environmental movement the way there is today. And we're in a very different place now. The average family's half that size. Talk to any young person now, we tend to have 1 or 2 kids at most. We're looking at smaller homes. We want to live closer in. We want to be more environmentally conscious. We're seeing a lot of those baby boomers that were born in that time period starting to retire. They're looking at trying to downsize from the large single-family homes they raise their kids in. Seeing young people that are waiting a little bit longer to settle down. And the whole design of how we say what a home is designed around that very large single-family home. And it's not working for a lot of people. I know when I went out and knocked on doors, I had a lot of people that were very worried about how this zoning was going to impact them. And I was ready to roll it back and am ready to roll it back. But I also heard a lot of the issues that people had. Like I said, folks that wanted to continue to live within the neighborhoods that they raised their children in. But they weren't able to because they didn't want to live in the large single-family home where they had to deal with the lot sizes, where they had to deal with that. I would see a lot of older folks who were living in places like Cumberland Circle communities, which is a quadruplex community that was a great place, but it's only limited if you go through the PD process. Met a lot of young professionals that felt like they had to be pushed out further and further and further from the city center, and young families that couldn't find homes that they could live in themselves, that they could raise their kids in. Like the home I live in. As I pointed out, when I brought up my idea of expanding out the number of small starter home lots, my 0.13 acre home with a 50-foot lot frontage could not be built in 96.2% of the single-family lots within the city of Gainesville. I would have been happy here today to reinstate single-family zoning, but I cannot vote to reinstate single-family zoning with these arbitrary restrictions that are on there, with these arbitrary lot size requirements, these arbitrary ways that you have to put a home in, that some of my favorite neighborhoods, like the Duck Pond, like Oakview, like Stephen Foster, so much of the district that I represent, if a fire were to tear through them tomorrow, you could not rebuild them. And I think they are the most vibrant, engaging neighborhoods within our city. I think that we should have more neighborhoods like them where you are allowed to build a front porch that comes right up to the street, where you can have a smaller home that a young family can afford to get into and is the right size for them. And so I was hoping that we would find that middle ground. I've heard from my colleagues that they want to find a middle ground moving forward, but I cannot in good conscience put my name to something that I think puts all of the problems that we had with an outdated zoning code right back on the table and say that that is something that I'd be willing to sign off on. So I will be voting no today. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Eastman. Commissioner Duncan Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight and for all of the work and passion that you've put into this entire process since these conversations and discussions began. Thank you to my colleagues for all of your impassioned comments. I yearn for that type of passion and really wish I could have seen that same type of passion when the Black communities that have been referred to tonight were being torn down or were being gentrified. That would have really been nice and impactful. It is not lost on me that we oftentimes tend to invoke Black people or Black communities in situations where we're trying to make a point, yet we don't listen to the Black people that are standing right before us, telling us what they want. Community engagement and community outcry has been major regarding this issue. And one of the things that's important to me in the way that I govern is not just to listen, but to respond. And to respond taking what it is that you tell me. I think we've seen the considerable numbers of individuals who have flooded this chamber from the beginning to tonight, telling us what you want. I also think we still have much opportunity. It's interesting to me how I think we've kind of couched this as an all or nothing type situation. And I don't really think that's what it is. This is a broad, sweeping ordinance. These ordinances are broad and sweeping. You've heard that, and it's true. And I think I said in a previous conversation, it's also like taking a sledgehammer to a situation when you really need to be using a scalpel. I think when you talk about development, there's a reason why it's been so challenging to have this conversation. There's a reason that it has even become vitriolic, and even though that's sad and disturbing even to watch, it's because it cuts to the core of who we are as people. It cuts to what we all feel is our human right. Where we live, how we live, and that's important. It's also why I feel like we need to be much more intentional about the way we do things in the city of Gainesville where development is concerned. We have a comprehensive plan. But about 2 months ago, this commission unanimously voted to also create an equitable development framework that would accompany that comprehensive plan. And I'm hopeful in that document that it can also serve as a companion for situations just like this. It can help to guide us in how we equitably develop our communities with thought, with precision, with care, with community input. That's what I'm looking forward to. It's already out there. Staff will be bringing that back to us. That is the opportunity that we have. I can appreciate the comments that everyone has made. I certainly can appreciate from a historical perspective that the problems of the past cannot be fixed in one meeting over the single motion or a single policy that's before us tonight. There will be many more meetings where we are trying to fix the affordable housing crisis. There will be many more meetings where we are addressing equitable development and how we want our community to grow. I simply think that we have to pay it the attention that it deserves. I'm going to support rolling this back, as I've said from the very beginning. And I'm going to do that because I think it is important that you listen. And I also realize the opportunity that lies before us in terms of creating a real lived equitable development experience and community. It is being done other places. We're not reinventing the wheel. We are simply taking what has been done in other places and applying that to this city. And I, for one, am extremely excited about that. I will conclude with those comments. I'll conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Duncan Walker. There are no other lights. There's a whole lot of things that I'm partially tempted to talk about, but frankly, that's just preaching and there's no reason to do it. Madam Clerk, as roll call.
Nay.
Got it. Commissioner Chestnut?
Aye.
Commissioner Sacco?
No.
Commissioner Duncan Walker?
Aye.
Commissioner Willits?
No.
Commissioner Book?
Aye.
And Mayor Ward.
Aye. So that passes 4-3 with Eastman, Saco, and Willits in dissent.
Our next item is the first reading of ordinance number 2023-168, an ordinance, restoration of exclusionary zoning amendment ordinance. An ordinance of the City of Gainesville, Florida, amending the Land Development Code and Zoning Map Atlas to provide regulations for and rezone associated property from neighborhood residential district to single-family zoning districts as more specifically described in this ordinance, providing directions to the city manager, providing directions to the codifier, providing a severability clause or appealing clause, and an effective date.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Commissioner Book.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I approve, I motion that we approve staff recommendation for this proposed ordinance for 2023-168.
Is there a second? Second. All right, motion second. Commissioner Chestnut. Okay, gotcha. Okay, well, let's hear from any folks who have signed up. I would encourage you, unless it's original thought, I don't know you're going to change anybody, so go ahead.
Robert Mounts, followed by Monica Frazier, followed by Jane Berman Holton.
And just because you signed up, don't mean you got to talk. So.
You know 3 minutes is not enough. Robert Mounts, again, on behalf of UPNA. This is the one that we have to talk a little bit about the process. This commission, I believe, on its own authority, could have done a straight repeal, as the code says you can do, by chapter and verse. You chose not to do that. You chose instead, in order to make it airtight, I understand, to go from the beginning, staff petition, plan board review, 2 hearings by the commission, and now it seems another 30 days for state review. That led to some confusion in this particular ordinance, at least for me, because instead of repealing those sections by chapter and verse and all that, each of these 3 ordinances attempts to amend the code that was enacted last fall, but is on hold and hasn't been implemented, is not enforced. We have another example of that with GRU, that they did that kind of thing. And I worry that that is a defect, but overall, I think the intent is clear to effectively get us back to where we were before those 3 ordinances were passed last fall, so that then we can move on to consider things like Commissioner Eastman's proposal or Stephanie Sutton's proposal for having NR as a category to be used where it's appropriate, that sort of thing. So I'm concerned about that, and I don't quite understand. I didn't follow closely Assistant City Attorney McDermott's explanation of those tables, but it's hard for me to understand why in one table we're saying we're adding single-family zoning back, and we're eliminating that in our category, but in the next table we've got residential in our category. So I want to be sure that what you pass tonight effectively does and carries out your intent and puts us back where we were last fall. And that's my concern. I'm also concerned about the staff's unwillingness now to present you a balanced view, not only the objections from the county, the objections from the state, the objections and the petitioners, and the reasons why they thought it was inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. None of those things were ever mentioned to the plan board or summarized or debunked. And the one-sided intransigent of the staff is deeply disturbing. I don't know how we can move forward with that and expect them to implement your will.
We need you to wrap up, please.
Appropriately.
Thank you.
Monica Frazier, I don't see her. I believe she left. Jane Berman Holton, followed by Donald Shepard. I don't see either. Ms. Holton?
Thank you very much, Chamberlain Holton. I wish we could just say call the vote on all the other two. But you can't do that, can you? You have to have citizens' comment. Okay. Well, I thank you all for your thoughtful comments. I do hope that the three opposed and the four that are for can work on trying to find something that will really work for affordable housing for the community. I think that's what we're all here for. And I wasn't sure about the ordinance we just passed. It says adding. It wasn't adding. It was kind of rescinding, was it not? I'm a little puzzled with that word, but that's just for me. But I wish you could just call the vote, but I'm sorry, I understand you can't. But so I will now quit, and I hope no one else wants to speak. Thank you.
Donald Shepard, I do not see him. Casey Fitzgerald, followed by Kim Tanzer.
I think I've said my piece. I don't need to comment any further.
Yes,
Thank you.
Ms. Tanzer?
Two things. First, Commissioner Eastman, I still do not understand why you don't think your house could be built across the city, because I believe it could be, and that's why it would be important for us to have a discussion. I think that it would be suitable almost across the city. That relates to this ordinance as well as the last one. We can talk about that later if you want, but what I want to talk about right now is what I think is an actual problem with the way this ordinance is written. So if I could have the overhead. I worked my way through graduate school as a legal secretary, and so this morning I did a comparison of the ordinances that were passed last fall with these ordinances. And the first and third seemed to be a complete reversal, as Mr. Nee had discussed. However, 168 is supposed to reverse 258. And here's the problem that I see, and I see it in 4 different places in the ordinance. In section 3, we have section 30-4.1, and here it crosses out neighborhood residential, as Mr. McDermott pointed out, and reinstates single-family zoning. That's what I think you all want to vote for by a 4-3 margin today. That's section 3. Now we go to section 4. It's the same, it's referring to the same section, 30-4.1. Here it adds single-family zoning, but it also has neighborhood residential zoning. So there are 2 versions of the same table in this ordinance, but they have different content. So if you pass this, you're passing something that I believe is internally incompatible, and that happens in sections 3 and 4, sections 5 and 6, sections 8 and 9, and sections 10 and 11. And I don't understand how the same table can say 2 different things at the same time in our code. It doesn't do that now, and the last ordinance that you passed did not do that either. That ordinance had only 1 version of these tables. And I'm not a lawyer, so it looks like Mr. Nee's going to explain that now.
Are you all done? Okay, thank you. Mr. Nee, did you want to?
Mr. Mayor, just to reiterate what Attorney Sean McDermott indicated, what we have in the proposed ordinance 2023-168 is the exact ordinance that was 211358 that passed on second reading last October, but all the underlines in 211358 have been stricken in 2023-168, and all the stricken language in 211358 passed last October are now underlines indicating new language in 2023-168. And we double-checked that again today because, frankly, we were quite concerned when we heard that someone indicated that they thought that there was an error. Errors happen, obviously, but this is not a situation where we want an error to happen, believe me. So we've confirmed that that's exactly what's going on. And as Mr. McDermott explained, for example, in section 3 of this new proposed ordinance before you, it is striking out the language residential NR than neighborhood residential, which was added to that table in last October in ordinance 211358. Then in section 4, another discrete change to the same table where in the previous ordinance that was passed in October, it struck through RSF 1 to 4 and single family, and now is making that discrete change in the ordinance before you, underlining, therefore adding in the RSF 1 to 4 single family language. As he said, in order to have preserve severability, each of these discrete changes is handled separately. It is exactly the way it was done last October. As we promised you in preparing this, when we were given direction, we would make the ordinance precisely as it changed in last October. Underlines became stricken language became underlines. That's what the codifier will look to. If this ordinance were to pass on second reading, it will come back and put the codified ordinances just the way they were prior to the change last fall. Sean, do you have anything you want to add to that?
It sounds like what you're doing is the strike-throughs are in one version, the additions are in another version, and you'll merge them in the final code. Is that what you're saying?
Mr. Mayor, the codifier will take each change as it comes and make that change. So language that is added will be added, language that is stricken will be removed, and you'll end up with these tables just as they were prior to last October.
Thank you. Who's next? Okay. I'm going to ask, remind everybody, this is still a commission meeting, so I try to be more flexible than we had been in the past, but there is a formality that's necessary, so thank you. Commissioner Willets.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad we talked a little bit more about these, the charts, in essence, the strike-throughs. I've come to understand it as described, and I think the reason I feel comfortable with just understanding, I'll be voting no on this, but I'm very comfortable with this because in my mind, what it is rather than have one action on one chart, because the action, meaning section 3, is that if it is for some reason improper, challenged, whatever, sued, this, that, or a decision of this commission, or in the future, it's that instead there are two sections because we have two actions. We are, or as proposed, we are getting rid of the zoning type neighborhood residential, and we are bringing back RSF 1 to 4 single family. And so even though it looks a little weird, it's two different actions onto the same chart, and you change the chart you're changing isn't a past amendment. So you can't, you have to use that past ordinance. You have to mimic that. You have to say, this is what the past ordinance was, we're striking this. In a different action, this is the past ordinance, we're adding this. And that helped me understand the idea of what our actions are, it really is two actions. So that helped me understand, even as I got a little confused when this came up in conversation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Willets. I see no more lights. Madam Clerk.
Commissioner Sacco?
No.
Commissioner Willets?
No.
Commissioner Book?
Aye.
Commissioner Eastman?
No.
Commissioner Chestnut?
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan Walker?
Aye.
And Mayor Ward.
Aye, that passes 4-3 with Willets, Sacco, and Eastman in dissent. Next up.
Ordinance number 2023169, restoration of exclusionary zoning text change amendment ordinance. An ordinance of the City of Gainesville, Florida, amending the Land Development Code regarding development and the use of neighborhood scale multifamily dwellings as more specifically described in this ordinance, providing directions to the codifier, providing a severability clause or repealing clause, and an immediate effective date.
I see no lights. Does anybody in the, do anyone for public comment? All right.
Robert Mounts, followed by Kim Tanzer.
Robert Mounts again on behalf of EP&A. The main thing that I would want to just remind, one thing is that we were very concerned about removing all occupancy limits. and converting homes that were maybe 3-bedroom, 2-bath into 5-bedroom homes and then renting them by the room. And that's happened. We were concerned about that. We wanted to preserve the definition of family that's in the code, which was put in there under the U.S. Supreme Court case, the village of Belterre, forgotten the other party, specifically to protect family neighborhoods from, a whole big building full of students. So nothing against students. So we were all students. Congratulate Commissioner Willits for striking me dead with the old ageism thing, and also, the have and have-nots thing. That has never been part of the equation. I do look forward to this commission finding ways to build smaller homes for people. And by the way, and everybody knows, and this has been said against me before, but I don't live in my former neighborhood anymore. Where I live now, with a 3-store limit, there's virtually every form of housing. What we don't have is the crush of, developers building them to rent by the room to students. There are townhouses, there are condominiums, there's freestanding homes. David Coffey lives in one of them, very nice home. There's restaurants. It's a neighborhood just far enough from the university that we don't have the problem that UPNA has or that Porter's has. People aren't going in offering money to buy their lot so they can build a student bungalow. That is the issue. That's the only issue. And to suggest that we're just NIMBYs and racist, I resent that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mounts. I will note that that's the only issue.
Ms. Tanzer, followed by Andy Coffey.
My gift to you tonight is to thank you for your votes and not to speak anymore.
Mr. Mayor, Andy Coffey, this ordinance is one that contains many of the provisions that I believe are helpful for allowing more affordable housing types to be developed, like Commissioner Eastman described. Smaller lots and smaller houses cannot be developed in many of these existing zoning districts that were just reinstated. And I'd like for you all to keep in mind how long it takes to make changes for staff to bring back incremental changes is an incredibly long process. Case in point is an item on your agenda tomorrow night concerning setbacks from the center lines of streets. That has been holding up permits for affordable housing for over a year. And that came to that came as from the commission as a commission initiative with a unanimous vote. That's how that started. And it's a process that takes over a year, and it's still not adopted. And once you act on it tomorrow night, hopefully it'll be adopted. There's still time before it becomes effective. So it will be years before any subsequent measures will actually yield more affordable housing types. This is a big step backwards for years to come. Thank you.
All right, I still don't see any lights. Somebody going to have to make a motion at some point. Or not. Commissioner Chestnut.
Move staff's recommendation, move commission adopt the proposed ordinance 2023-169.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We've already heard public comment. Commissioner Willits.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the one that I think it sticks me even more strongly because this is where the opportunity to have some different types of housing also that were single family, that were smaller lots, that, this is the one that deals with when we're talking about what a family is And this is the one I think that sticks me a little more. This is one of the ones where I mentioned previously about we have different actions and we kind of separate them out so that there can be some flexibility if something gets struck down or different decisions are made. And this is the one where it is a different action, though it is tied up with neighborhood residential zoning. I see the clear, neighborhood residential zoning exists in this ordinance. So the problem is this text change, though there's a whole bunch in there. It's hard to, even if we wanted to keep some of the good things where there's some people think are good, it's a little hard to do this with the old being in here. This is the one that sticks me a little more, and so I still oppose it. But I wanted to make sure I mentioned, because previously I talked really about different types of housing in the 2, 3, 4 quadplex kind of thing, and this is the one that really is about those smaller lot size and how we choose to live and how we want to live, and this is another one of those. This is about homes as well. It's not just an add-on. It's not just something that helps codify a different part, right? Like you have zoning and land use. This is really about our code and kind of deep into it about things that Mr. Coffey mentioned. I hope we can get back to these. I hope we get to back a lot of the strong ones. I wish we could keep them here tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Willetts. Yeah, let's go ahead and do. There's no more lights. So, Madam Clerk.
Commissioner Willetts?
No.
Commissioner Chestnut?
Aye.
Commissioner Sacco?
No.
Commissioner Duncan Walker?
Aye.
Commissioner Book?
Aye.
Commissioner Eastman?
No.
And Mayor Ward?
Aye. That passes 4-3 with Commissioners Willetts, Sacco, and Eastman in dissent. All right, that takes us to member comment, correct? I wanted to mention to everyone, thank you, no matter what side you're on and how passionately you feel about this. Thank you for being here and being patient. And I want to thank my colleagues and staff for your efforts as well. I understand there's an enormous amount of passion in this, as well as an enormous amount of work that has gone into this that may seem like it did not bear fruit. And I want you to know that I appreciate all the work that everyone put into it. And I also hope that we will basically simultaneously with the second reading of these coming back, hear some things like what Commissioner Eastman brought up before. And I understand the irony in that. It is not lost on me, believe me. Nobody has to explain it to me. But we said we were going to go back to a steady state. And I totally understand why folks might be frustrated with that. And I'm asking you to have some patience with the rest of us who need to get back to that place before we start approaching things one thing at a time. I see no other lights. So the best thing about this is we get to do it all again at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'll see you then.